either we've never heard about or which we just don't want to hear about. Solomon said in the Song of Solomon, he spoke of things being vain, and he talked of vanity. And he said that knowledge bringeth woe. And he wasn't joking. The more you know, the more woe you have. The reason that some of these folk dropped out of school in the 60s and decided to tune in then tune out was because they got a handle on what was taking place and they didn't like what they saw. And it's easier to get out than to stay in. I gave you two introductions or two first segments of two particular books that I'm going to be using specifically to take out of it a couple of things that we've already begun. The topic of this session we've already started last week. It's actually Babylon the Great out of Revelation, the 18th chapter. If you haven't got them, it's this sheet. If you don't have it, talk to me after. We'll get it to you. But it basically is taking the 18th chapter of the book of Revelation, and we're going to be using that as a backdrop, or at least what we're going to be doing is utilizing the criteria that's laid out, chapter 18, 19, and 20, describing what Babylon the Great is. It's a great whore riding on the seven-headed beast. And everybody goes, oh yeah, that's the false church. And immediately, because it's referred to as a false church, or literally Babylon is the symbol of the type of false religion, we set ourselves in a position where what we first try to do is try to compare this false religion to a religion that already existed. And we point to the Catholics, and then we point to the Islamic, and we point to the Jehovah's Witnesses. We point to everybody who doesn't think like we do. And we immediately are prognosticating on which one's going to be the false church, which one's going to rise up. And we're always looking for the false church to rise up somewhere. And we're looking for, some great move of the Pope or something that's going to cause things in the last days. And when we talk about Babylon the Great, I don't want you to be ignorant of what the devil's doing. We cannot be those types of individuals who just come up with some imagery or some notion of what Babylon is, especially because there's a lot of these idiots on television that call themselves prophecy teachers. And in being prophecy teachers, they try to come up with these ideas of what the imagery symbolizes. And I've heard many sermons calling the Pope the Antichrist, making reference to, ever since I was a young Christian, Ronald Reagan was the Antichrist, then Bill Clinton's the Antichrist, now George Bush is the Antichrist, and everybody's the Antichrist. And everything that happens in the Middle East is the prelude to Armageddon. And every time something takes place that rocks the European world or something, this is the Antichrist. It's happening now, and we're at the end. And you got these prophecy teachers that are always saying the U.S. is Babylon the Great. And they're always quick to tell us how we represent Babylon the most because of our luxurious lifestyle, because of the things we possess, and because of the attitudes that we possess, that we, in fact, are Babylon. And we can't be Babylon because we're Manasseh. You're either going to be gods or you're not. We're not Babylon. Now, our system, and probably a lot of the things that have filtered into our system, is Babylonian in nature, but as well as Medo-Persian, as well as Greek, as well as Roman in nature. So we're not going to argue that fact, but there's no way the U.S. is Babylon. And yet, as we read the criteria of Babylon, this is what we're going to use as a springboard, and we're going to use this skeleton outline. And that's why I did this, so that we can continually refer to this, so that we're not duped, so that we don't sit there and listen to these prophecy teachers talking about the Middle East and talking about bin Laden, being the prelude to Armageddon. He ain't the prelude to Armageddon. He's just a terrorist. All these bombings taking place in Israel, people, this is it. It ain't it. Oh, get ready, Jesus is coming. No, he's not. The Bible makes it plain. Jesus himself said, you know the times, you know the seasons. Now, you ask most Christians, do you know the times and seasons? They go, oh no, he's going to come like a thief in the night. If you don't know, he comes like a thief in the night. But he gave us everything to know. So the feast day in which he comes is the Feast of Trumpets, takes place during what months? September, October. So if he didn't come during the time of September, October, guess what? You got another year. All right? So did he come back this last September, October? So is he going to come this year? Man, have fun. All right? What did that bumper sticker say? It said, Jesus is coming, look busy. So we're going to use this as a springboard. That's what this is. So Revelation, the 18th chapter, we're also using Daniel chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar had a vision. Nebuchadnezzar saw the image of a man in his dream. God letting this Babylonian king understand something about the future. God utilizing this. The head of the man was made of gold. The two arms joined at the chest made of silver. Inferior. the belly of brass, legs of iron, iron, clay, 10 toes, and then a stone kingdom. Book of Revelation cranks the microscope down just a little tighter and tells us that out of these 10 toes comes the Antichrist kingdom. When the stone kingdom, the kingdom of Jesus comes, when Jesus returns, he strikes the image in the foot. Because the foot is made of miry clay mingled with iron, the whole image from head to toe crumbles. Why does it happen in the end? Why does that head of gold, the arms joined at the chest made of silver, the belly of brass, the iron legs, why do those remnants of the kingdom fall in the end? Because they are still present, they are still working, they are still part of our influence. And I don't care what people tell you. Listen, a lot of people go get real upset as we go through this. How many of you were shocked and surprised as we went through and traced biblically? And I told you, if you're doing any studies on ethnology, if you do it outside of Genesis chapter 10, or if somebody's teaching you ethnology outside of Genesis chapter 10, I'll tell you right out, they're full of crap. And you don't need to listen to folk like that. You got a lot of people telling you about the Bible, and oh, we read the Bible, and they're out there preaching ethnic gospels. And I think you all know what I mean by ethnic gospels, man. When you go to a church where it's full of Hispanics, Jesus is named Jesus. Huh? Kind of draws you a little closer to him, huh? And then they cover all the bases by saying, when God spoke to Moses, he said, I am that I am. So if Moses was Mexican, then God is. They're just trying to cover all the bases. But you know what I'm talking about when we say we're teaching an ethnic gospel. You want to feel good because Jesus is like you. Man, if Jesus had polka dots in a tail, all right, it's his shed blood that brings us into the fellowship with God that he intended for us from the start. But if we want to play games and play ethnic games and do things like start to misconstrue the Bible and twist it, like how many of y'all know that when Herod started killing babies because he was afraid, because he knew that a baby born that night, man, was the Christ child, he would be called the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He just didn't understand that his kingdom wasn't of this world. Jesus was not to depose Herod. He was not to depose Caesar. He was going to come to redeem us and establish a kingdom of heaven that they didn't have any clue what it was all about. But when Herod heard there was one born that was going to be a king, he said, I'm going to kill all the babies. And what does the Bible say? That he ran off to where? Where did Jesus' family take him to hide? Egypt. Now, again, when we talk about preaching the ethnic gospel, it's not Egypt anymore. It's, and Jesus went home to Africa. Yeah, that's right. Africa's a continent. But when you say Africa instead of Egypt, all the black people get woo! Now again, why do we need to do that? Look, I know there's some black people here. Do you get more comforted knowing he ran off to Africa than he ran off to Egypt? Huh? Oh, he ran home. Well, if he ran home, how come he didn't stay there? See, if you're going to play that game and say, oh, he fled home to Africa, my next question is, so why did he leave? Why didn't he stay there? I guess he couldn't put up with the folk there, huh? Too much barbecue. So I think you know what I'm talking about when we speak about the ethnic gospel, man. We got to twist the story to make people like it. You know, we got to compete with the Islamic, and we got to compete with all these other religions. So we're going to go ahead and take Christianity and pepper it all full of, African, folk tales and make, Jesus a black man. Let's not play games like that. Let's understand that this is the Son of God. He could have had I'm telling you, he could have been polka dotted with a tail. And if the Son of God came to hang on the cross and shed his blood for the redemption of sin, I still believe in him. You don't have to turn him into something he was or wasn't. I told you in Genesis chapter 10, if your teachings or if your studies in ethnology don't begin out of Genesis chapter 10, you better throw that understanding away. You better throw all that stuff away. And I think you understand what I'm talking about because you sat here and we went through and we traced every single one of these folk and their lineages, and we know where these people came from. We know where they are. We know where they're going to be in the future. So we trace these things. We know who they are. We know where they came. Now, how many of you kind of got a little bit shook up or at least got rattled in the brain figuring out where all these folk came from and where they went? How many of you just said, wow, I didn't know all that? I didn't know about them Sat-Gilas and them Masagetai, and I didn't know anything about them, Kimri and Kumris and Sakisunes. I didn't know anything about all them folk that migrated out there and called themselves the Celtics, the Keltoids. I didn't know who these folk were. I didn't know about the Biturges who became the Franks, all these, Burgundians and all these other folk, the Tuatha De Danann, all these Irish. We didn't know who these Irish were. All these Gadales and Gales who became the Gaelic people. We don't know who these are. These people that lived in the Scuth booths, the Sukkoth, the Hebrew word, and all of a sudden they become known as Scots. How many of y'all tripped out on that stuff? Huh? Kind of like, whoa, I didn't know all this. Man, I didn't know that the sons of Zara ended up being the Dardanians. I didn't know that they actually founded the city of Troy, the city of Sparta, the city of Athens with Chalco, that they founded Troy out there with Brutus. I didn't know that. And then they migrated into Sicily, and they became literally your Italians. And then from there, you got the Mycenaeans, and from the Mycenaeans, you got all these groups of people that eventually became civilizations. And as we read those things, we're going, wow, look at this. And we found that the gospel, or at least the plan of God, migrated from those regions of Israel and Palestine. Rather than south and west, they migrated north and west into Europe. Found out about the birthright promise. As we read those things, you find that it's very difficult to listen to folks start talking about, all these other, things. Jesus in India. Get lost. All right? Jesus wasn't in India. Thomas went there, preached the gospel. Wasn't Jesus. Start telling you things about, oh, yeah, we believe in Jesus. He was a good prophet. He came to Bangkok. No, he didn't. Everybody says, the Ark of the Covenant, I know where it is. It's in Ethiopia, in some temple. You really think that if the Ark of the Covenant was in Ethiopia, somebody wouldn't have showed it to somebody? The French think they got it, by the way. Really, I'm not kidding you. The French think they got the Ark of the Covenant. The Israelis think they got the Ark of the Covenant. Some people think it's hidden under the mound of, in Scotland, the mound of Tara. So where's that ark? I don't know. If you believe Indiana Jones, it's in a bureaucratic warehouse in Washington. Huh? It's stashed away. All I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of things in this Bible that if we really study it to its end, we're going to find out that this word is true. And we're going to find out that, in fact, God has a plan. So when we talk about Babylon, if we want to be ignorant, if we want to be them kind of folk that sit back and talk about Bible prophecy, and it's not really locust demons, it's Harley Davidsons, These ain't really, demons coming out to sting people. These are attack helicopters shooting rubber bullets. The reason they had the faces of a woman is because by the time Armageddon happens, they're going to have women fighter pilots. Hey, if you watch Channel 40, that's the kind of stuff you hear. I'm just trying to cut through that stuff. And sure, I beat up on folk for doing that, but why do I beat up on them? Because we know enough to read this word and find out these people are just crazy. They're just parroting something they heard. In fact, as we read through some of these books, you're going to find out every one of these guys came to a conclusion that didn't happen. And why did that happen? Because they get a little bit of information, and then they think that's enough to prognosticate what's going to happen in the future. And these books, a lot of them are written in the early 1900s, so they tell you by 1950 this is going to happen, by 1930 something this is going to happen, and they tell you what's going to happen, it never happens. So we'll cut through a lot of the stuff. We've already gone through and defined where these ideas come from. We've already defined that back with Ur-Nammu in Babylon, historically, and we'll get a copy of that. You can get that out of the Encyclopedia Britannica, but I'll get you a copy of that. Ur-Nammu, it was discovered in Babylon during their first heyday, that in the ziggurat temples they actually found a way to bring in people's gold and store it. And as a result of storing gold, what ended up happening was they realized we can lend out 10 times the amount of gold we have in reserve. And as they figured this out, they literally turned the temple and the priests into a banking institution where you can actually have loans going out at 20% interest. They just didn't know how to fluctuate a prime rate. So they went 20% flat. So this temple, this religious site that basically was guaranteeing people safekeeping of their precious metals, became a banking empire, a lending empire, with the priests being the bankers, deciding and determining who actually gets the loan and who doesn't, receipts on it, prosperity by it. I mean, all of this began to happen. The capitalistic system thus was born out of Babylon. This is why it remains till today. We've defined Babylon according to chapter 18 and 19 of the Word of God that describes it as possessing everything. Kings. All the kings fornicate with her. It says the saints all fornicate with her. All the merchants fornicate with her. Everybody sells out to her is what it means. There ain't a soul that hadn't sold out to her. So we need to find out who this tramp is. Wouldn't you agree? Now I'm being nice because the Bible calls her a whore. Huh? Calls her a harlot. I'm being like the other preachers. We need to find out who this tramp really is. All right? Now one of the things I like about that first handout I gave you, this is the book. It's called Jim Marrs. People will look at you and they're going to say, oh, you crazy. I like his introduction because he nails a lot of things that we need to discuss. I guess I started with page number 5, if you got your page number 5 there. It's the one that starts out, it says, a question of conspiracy. Y'all got that? If you don't have it, you're going to get it, but it says a question of conspiracy. One of the first things that happens when we start to talk about things like this is people are going to peg you as a conspiracy nut or somebody who pursues conspiracy, when that's not the case at all. One of the biggest problems with our society is that we are fed a line of information that's never complete. So we have to start looking for answers on our own. When the Arabs blow up the World Trade Center, everybody just immediately, it's an attack on America, and everybody's just pissed off, want to kill Arabs. Look what they did to us. And all the television, and I told you the day it happened. I sat there, I turned on the television. I haven't gotten a fight with my wife over it. I said, don't buy this propaganda. Don't buy this crap. Don't listen to what they're telling you. Look beyond what's taking place. Because I put channel 2, it says, terror in America, strike against America, the war against America, attack on America. Every news agency had a similar story. We didn't do nothing. They just came and blew us up. It's an attack. It's war on America. And all of these, this is what they said to us. Now, that's all they're still saying to us. Doesn't anybody ever step back and say, what? Now, listen, I'm going to tell you right now, there is nothing that our country can do to deserve what they did to us. But do you all agree that in their eyes they have some rationale? Huh? We've never done that. Now, our foreign policy sometimes does things to people that they may not like, and some of us are a little more conscientious, we may not like. I was in Haiti, and the guy came and said, how long you been in the CIA? Stop trying to help you, fool. And it happened in Guatemala, too. They think you're in the CIA. You're out there pulling teeth and giving people shots and doing medical missions out there preaching God, and they think you're in the CIA. Now, if you're just regular folk, you don't have any idea what they're talking about until you start understanding how our government sends people dressed like priests to cause insurgencies, to control the nations. Huh? This thing about the war on drugs. Everybody knows about the war on drugs. You also know about Manuel Noriega, huh? Get a little CIA training, turn him into a drug dealer, and when they get mad at him because he don't do what you say, you got to go get him. Huh? Y'all know what happened to Ollie North? Huh? Could you imagine the government allowing a drug trade? Allowing women to get turned out? Guys to get turned out? Man, your car, your VCR got stolen because of crack. And you find out that the government was saying it's okay because we got to fund the Contra war? Huh? Or at least a segment of the government said, hands off that guy because we got to fund. How many of you, a lot of people, I don't believe that. You don't want to believe that. You want eyes closed. You want the simplicity of life. All right? You don't want to believe what really takes place. When you start to study these things, as you start to be informed, as you start to read these things, people are going to look at you like you're crazy. But that's okay. Let them think you're crazy. If the news does not disseminate the full story, the information, you got to go look for it. So let's read. I'm going to highlight some points. I'm not going to read the whole thing word for word. First paragraph, the concept of conspiracy has long been anathema to most Christians. Nobody wants to deal with conspiracy. Who have been conditioned by the mass media to believe that conspiracies against the public only exist in banana republics or communist nations. This simplistic view, encouraged by the media, listen, Jim Marrs refers to this as a simplistic view. What's he saying? If you believe the media, you're a simpleton. All right? This simplistic view, encouraged by the media, devoted to maintaining a squeaky clean image of the status quo, fails to take into account human history or the subtleties of the word conspiracy. The word is derived from the Latin conspirare, literally meaning to breathe together, to act or think in harmony. In modern times, conspiracy has taken on a sinister connotation. Most dictionaries now offer two definitions of the word: to plan together secretly, especially to commit an illegal or evil act, or to plan or plot secretly. One definition is vile, the other is less. It's the intent that is being dealt with. Secrecy is connecting tissue found throughout man's past. There are secrets between individuals and groups, as well as secrets to be kept by both church and government authorities. There are political secrets, even secrets of finance and commerce. Obviously, a conspiracy among co-workers to buy the boss a present is not the same level of conspiracy as bank robbers scheming their next job, right? But they're both conspiracies. Now, isn't that funny? Do you know that conspiracy is a felony? If me and Vern and his son got together and said, we go rob a bank, we got to do it. You ready? Even though we didn't do it, if somebody overheard us and reported us, do you know that conspiracy alone is a felony? Right? Conspiracy is a felony. If we even talked about it, we face felony charges. And all they have to prove is that we in fact conspired. We don't have to do the act. The fact that we were planning or conspiring, that's enough. Now, isn't it amazing that people get busted for conspiracy every single day, and yet there are large conspiracies that occur, and nobody ever does nothing to these powers that be? Obviously, a conspiracy, okay, the key to the evil conspiracy is the intent of the secrecy. While some secrets may be benign, why spoil the surprise party by telling? Other secrets, such as suppressing cures for cancer or AIDS or fomenting war, would be considered despicable by people of conscience. Now, how many of you have heard the tales that people have found cures for cancer, but they don't want to tell you? Huh? That AIDS is not necessarily a death sentence if you do the right things. You ever heard that? Now, why do people come up with these things? I mean, if these are absolutely blatant lies, why do people come up with these things? Obviously, if nobody's giving you the right information, if somebody gets cured of cancer. Listen, by the way, how does Magic Johnson look? Huh? He looks good for HIV positive, doesn't he? What's he doing? So doesn't that spit in the face or fly in the face of, you know, what a lot of people are saying about AIDS, HIV? So when you see something like that, doesn't that make you at least want to say, well, that can't be true what the government's telling us? And you start to look for things, and you start to find exceptions. Or somebody says, AIDS was actually concocted or created inside a laboratory and given to black folk in Africa to kill them all. How many of y'all heard that one? Now, why do people say things like that? Because when somebody ain't giving you the whole picture, somebody got to try to fill in the blanks, right? All right. Those secrets that cause to ruin lives or that prevent people from living together in harmony are used for control or undue profit are unacceptable to most people. Therefore, whoever conspires to keep such secrets must be carefully scrutinized by everybody concerned with individual freedom. So if you feel that somebody isn't telling you the truth, what is your responsibility? You got to scrutinize them. It is your responsibility to keep an eye on them. It's your responsibility to find out everything they're doing if you truly want to be free. Columnist Stuart Alsop once wrote, knowledge is power, and power is the most valuable commodity in government. So whosoever knows the secrets controls the knowledge, therefore holds the power. So if people don't know, guess what? They're powerless. Now I'm reading these forwards because if we don't read these forwards, we're going to be in the same boat. You're going to be hearing things, and you're going to be saying things, and you're going to be listening to me teach things that you're going to say, where in the world are you getting that? Or why are you saying that? And what I'm trying to get at is we got to be able to fill in the blanks to fully understand exactly what Babylon is and who it is. Because do you think the devil's stupid? Does anybody here think he's stupid? The devil isn't stupid. The devil wants to hide Babylon because Babylon wants to fornicate with everybody. You know, the guy that goes around swindling women, do you think he wants everybody to know what he's about? Huh? See, the devil don't want Babylon to be exposed. The devil doesn't want people to know who Babylon is. So he hides everything about her. We're just going to pull the sheets off of her today. It says, this knowledge is jealously guarded by secrecy. It turns the old adage, what you don't know can't hurt you, right on his head. What you don't know can hurt you. The issue of conspiracy also lies in the heart of how one views history. Now he goes on and speaks of two views of history. We're not going to read that. You can read it later. It's accidental or conspiratorial, saying that there's one view that says everything that happens in history we didn't know about, we didn't foresee it. Now, again, 2 planes smash into the World Trade Center on September 11th, and the CIA and the FBI say, oh, caught us by surprise. We never imagined this was going to happen. Then they talk to Putin from Russia, and he says, I feel bad because I should have done something because I knew that was going to happen. Y'all remember Putin, the Russian guy? Huh? And then you find out that the FBI knew, they just didn't tell the CIA, and the CIA knew, didn't tell nobody told nobody. Everybody knew. Now, how many people already think that's evil if people knew and just didn't say nothing? Now, are you un-American because you get mad? Because if the guy in Russia knew, how come we didn't know? Now, you all heard the interview. Putin sat there saying, I felt so bad. I wished I could have done more because I knew. Then we find out later that as they busted people in Germany, they found right there in the room papers and pages with instructions on how you go steal an airplane and smash the World Trade Towers. Now, are you a nut because you want somebody now to be accountable of what somebody knew? Are you a nut? Now people go get mad and say, what are you, anti-American? Heck no. We don't want to get screwed like that. Huh? What you don't know can't hurt you. So it's either an accident or it's conspiratorial. Somebody knew. You can read that on your own. Bottom of the page where it says, according to conspiracy researchers, Jonathan Vankin, John Whalen, the America's public attitudes are shaped by a sanitized Disney view of both history and current events. The Disney version of history could just as easily be called the New York Times version, or the TV version, or the college textbook version they wrote. So what does that tell you? Is the news going to tell you the truth? Is Time and Newsweek? The main resistance to conspiracy theory comes not from people on the street, but from the media, academia, and government. People who manage the national and global economy of information. So when you talk to people about conspiracy, who are the people that dislike it the most? Well, news people. Because them talking heads on television, when you finally tell them, you ain't telling, do you really believe they can tell you the truth? I don't care who they are. Peter Jennings, Dan Rather, all these guys that think they're gods. Do you think that in 30 minutes they can tell you the truth? Huh? Hey, these are the Taliban. They're bad guys. They oppress women. Then they go on to the next story. Victoria's Secret models protest. Isn't that what the news says? That's news? You go from the Taliban to Victoria's Secret models? You really think Dan Rather is telling you the truth because he tells you for 10 seconds that the Taliban are bad folk? I'm not telling you they're good folk. I'm just telling you, you don't know the whole story. We don't know the whole story listening to those guys. Now, do I like them? No, I don't like them. I don't like them folk who blow people up. I'm just saying that you don't get the full picture listening to those talking heads. I don't care how credible people think Peter Jennings is, or Dan Rather, all those other folk. They sit there in your living room for 30 minutes. World News Tonight, 30 minutes. Huh? Some sitcoms are longer. 30 minutes. You think he's telling you the truth on everything he's talking about in 30 minutes? Why do people tolerate that? You know why people tolerate that? Because we'd rather be entertained. We want to get to Seinfeld. We want to get to King of the Hill or The Simpsons. Huh? And when you talk about a 30-minute news broadcast, what are they telling you? I mean, with all these bad things happening in the world, why they got to squeeze in Those real stupid, lame stories about, movie stars who get divorced 13 times and marry each other. Like if we care. Obviously somebody does. Huh? Yeah, inquiring minds. Hey, by the way, doesn't it get you mad? Weren't they beating up the Inquirer a couple months ago because they wrote about George Harrison having cancer and dying? Y'all remember that all the news people were beating up the Inquirer? Bad taste. Why'd you do that? And then George Harrison dies. You know why they got mad? Because they got scooped by a rag. You think those talking heads like that rag? But did they tell the truth? He's dead, isn't he? Somebody should have picked up the Inquirer. Anthony Sutton, a London-born economics professor, was a research fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institute. That's a think tank. He agreed that an establishment history dominates textbooks, publishing, the media, library shelves. How many of you like the idea that there's an establishment history? That means it's not true. They've come up with an establishment history that is sanitized that people can live with. That's why my daughter, she comes home and she starts telling me like things about Christopher Columbus, and then I tell her the truth about him. I say, he's Italian. How come Italy didn't give him the boats? Huh? Because he wasn't good. What kind of navigator thinks he's going around the planet, ends up hitting the islands of the Caribbean and sees folk and calls them Indians? Huh? That's like hitting the Oregon border and saying, oh, Eskimos. Now, if somebody called themselves a navigator did that, what would you think of him and his navigation skills? Anybody want to take a trip with him? Run into some folk in Oregon and say, oh, my God, the Eskimos. Columbus discovered America. I even told you guys about this. What happened in 1492? Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Everybody knows that. Is that when U.S. history begun? No. So why does it begin there for everybody in school? Why did you learn that? Huh? What happened in 1776? Now, I know y'all know the answer. We got our independence from England, right? Is that where our history begins? So how come U.S. history always starts out with Columbus? Weren't there folk here before Columbus? How come history of America doesn't start with pre-Columbians or pre-Columbus Americans? Doesn't it bother you that there is an establishment history that lies to you? Tell you that Thanksgiving Day was a day when the pilgrims just got together and said, oh, thank you, God, for sending us Indians. Oh, that Squanto dude, he's cool. He set us up, man. We know how to hunt turkey and grow corn now. Good old Squanto. We're going to get him later. Don't you agree that's just a sanitized version of history? Never happened like that? Huh? I was talking to my wife. I said, man, if she's old enough to get lied to, she's old enough to get the truth told to her. Can you imagine? She's in a Christian school and they lying to her. Now, are they lying to her because they want to lie to her? No, they lie to her because they get curriculum. Now, could you imagine people going out and getting a degree in education and they teach them this lie? Huh? One of the reasons I didn't want my kid in public school was for that reason alone. At least in a parochial school, you got people that feel that there's a call of God on them to teach. And there's a higher stewardship to answer to. You got some of these folk going to public school. This is why, you ask most kids at a certain grade level to spell something, they can't spell it. About the only thing they know how to spell is no drugs because they got to tie ribbons on the fence. Huh? While they're writing no drugs on the fence post with red ribbons, what you think the white kids in the affluent areas are learning? Huh? I never see no drugs written on the affluent neighborhoods on the chain link fences of the elementary schools. Do you? Huh? Officer John don't go to those schools and say, now if you see your mother smoking weed, call us. Huh? Kids are walking around, how to identify, marijuana and pills and everything, and they know more about that stuff than they do about reading. Now, you like the idea that there's established history and established things that they want people to learn? You like that idea? During the past 100 years, any theory of history or historical evidence that falls outside the pattern of established American historical association and the major foundations with their grant-making powers has been attacked or rejected, not on the basis of evidence presented, but on the basis of acceptability of the arguments of the so-called Eastern liberal establishment. In its official historical line, he commented, "Woe betide any book or author that falls outside the official guidelines. Foundation support is not there. Publishers get cold feet. Distribution is hit or miss, non-existent." The refrain was echoed by Bill Clinton's academic mentor, Dr. Carroll Quigley, his 1966 book, Tragedy and Hope, History of the World in Our Time. We'll be reading out of there, too. Second to the last paragraph. This concern is echoed outside the U.S. A French publisher once was quoted saying, "It would not be possible to trace ownership of corporations and the power structure in the United States. They would not permit it. They would find a way to hound and torture anyone who tried. They seem to be a fairly small group of people who each know each other, but many are not known to the public at all. They move in and out of government jobs. Public service apparently serves to win private promotion rather than the other way around. The government control that practically everybody mentions cannot be traced through stockholders or stockholdings, regulatory agency, public decisions. It seems to function through a maze of personal contacts and tacit understandings. To this one might add the membership into secret societies." I will skip that. Go to page number 9. All right, page number 8. The bottom, 1997 Scripps Howard News Service poll in conjunction with Ohio University resulted in these remarkable statistics. 51% of those polled believed that it is likely for some federal officials were directly responsible for the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Let me ask you a question. Why don't people believe the report that JFK was just assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald? How come people don't just believe that? Isn't there too many holes in that story? Huh? I mean, the witnesses said they heard shots on the grassy knoll. And then mysteriously, all the witnesses are dead. Huh? Aren't they? The guy on the train, he's dead. Fella on the grass, no, he's dead. Woman on the grass, they're dead. Doesn't that make you think? Now check this out. More than a third suspect that the U.S. Navy shot down TWA Flight 800 either intentionally or unintentionally. Because folks saw a missile flying at it, right? Remember that? Nobody can prove it, but a third of people suspect that. A majority believe that it is possible that CIA officials intentionally allowed Central American drug dealers to sell cocaine to inner city black children. Huh? They must have believed old Freeway Ricky, huh? Y'all remember Freeway Ricky? He's an FBI informant that blew the story here. 60% felt that the government is withholding information regarding Agent Orange and the causes of Gulf War syndrome. Got all these soldiers coming back from the Gulf War sicker than dogs, exposed to chemical agents, and the VA says, "Ain't nothing wrong with you. That's male pattern baldness." Huh? Your skin's supposed to fall off like that. Right? Y'all know what happened. Later on they found out what the government did is they said, "We want you to go blow up their weapons depots." And these Marines went out there, set the charges, stood a couple miles downwind, blew them up, and they all stood there, woo, yahoo, seeing the fireworks show, standing downwind of the chemical weapons bunker they just blew up without knowing. Doesn't it bother you that these people get lied to? All you got to do is watch those pre-nuclear bomb testings. When they blew up the Bikini Islands, Marshall Islands with nuclear warheads and then sent the Navy in there, all them white fellas with Geiger counters. Yeah. Huh? Right? Measuring the radiation on the goats that they put out there just to see what this stuff does to people, huh? And then they told these white dudes, because they were mostly white men, they told these white dudes, "Don't worry, it'll wash off." Y'all know what happened to them, huh? They got hands big as catcher's mitts. Huh? Can't have kids. Folk dead, just jacked up, right? You ever see that film in the Nevada desert? They blow up a nuclear warhead, and then they march the troops into ground zero to measure or to see if you can actually launch an attack after a nuclear explosion, right? All them folks marched into ground zero after a nuclear explosion. They always, and again, look, I almost laugh at black people when they start telling me things like, huh? Tuskegee's nothing when you watch a whole platoon of white men marching into ground zero, and you don't think Oppenheimer and Einstein knew what happens at ground zero? You think they didn't know? Oh, we're afraid of the white man. Look what he did to the black folk. You shouldn't fear the white man for what he did to black folk. You need to fear him for what he does to white folk. Huh? I'm not preaching against white people. I'm just telling you that, you go hear all kinds of mess about this. People don't just make these things up. Why do you think people have to think like this? This is actually a study that was done. Almost half suspect the FBI agents set the fire that killed 81 Branch Davidians near Waco. We all saw it on TV. You could have served a warrant on them without getting shot. Listen, I'm going to tell you something. We all knew that was an Armageddon cult, and they thought the government was the Antichrist. You ain't going to catch me anywhere near them folk with a FBI or, ATF, jacket. They think you're the Antichrist coming. You want to go to a house like that, all you had to do was wait for them at the liquor store. They'd have shown up. Almost half suspect the FBI agents set the fire that killed 81 Branch Davidians near Waco, Texas in 93. This number undoubtedly grew much larger in 99 with the revelations about government deceit regarding pyrotechnic devices used prior to the fire. They used gas that was flammable. After the U.S. Air Force released a report that aliens reported at Roswell, New Mexico in 1947 were actually crash test dummies. First began in 1954. More people now believe that the government is covering up both information technology from extraterrestrials than before. This is what people think. Now listen. Reacting to this poll, the executive director of the Washington Committee for the Study of American Electorate, Curtis Gans, lamented, paranoia is killing this country. Why is he blaming the people? Paranoia is killing. Why is this guy blaming people for believing this? Now, every single one of these cases, how many of you, I'm not going to poll whether you believe these are true, but how many of you question every one of these incidents? You got to be an idiot not to. What does Gans say? Paranoia is killing this country. It's all your fault. They don't give you the information, then they blame you for killing the country. Huh? Now what do you think? You want to reelect this clown? You want to blame the public. But is it truly paranoia? Is there really no one out there conspiring to gain wealth and power? Stop and think about that. Is there really nobody out there conspiring to gain wealth and power? You think Bill Gates became rich by just stumbling upon everything? I mean, you all know the story about him. He didn't innovate anything. He stole it all from Apple. Huh? Y'all know that? That guy didn't even have an operating system. He went and paid some fella some money to buy his DOS. And the fella that had the DOS actually said, well, I thought I can come up with something better. It never did. You don't think anybody's out there conspiring to get rich? All right. An old wheeze reminds us, just because you're paranoid don't mean they're not out to get you. It's a growing belief that certain individuals with vast wealth and power, not generally known to the public, are the real masters in the United States and the world. Isn't that what 2nd Esdras teaches? Power is a fact of life in America. Most Americans are far removed from it. Secrecy is power's chief tool. Government seems distant, yet somehow domineering. We are increasingly isolated one from another, stuck in front of the computer, television screens, prisoners behind windshields. There is a frustrating feeling of disconnection to a modern American life. Conspiracy theories just try to put the pieces back together, wrote Jonathan Vankin, a journalist who studied a wide variety of conspiracy theories involving the U.S. government. Conspiracy theories are an attempt to try to grasp the big picture of history. So what are these conspiracy theories? Why do they come up? Because there's too much information missing. It's just people trying to put the lines together, just people trying to connect the dots, just trying to make sense of things that don't make sense. Last sentence, we are not dealing with coincidence or stupidity, but with planning and brilliance. Now, we'll read the rest later. Go to that next set of pages you have. Gary Allen's dead, but his book back in the early 70s, this was actually a runaway freight train. Nobody could stop it. Inside the book, there's actually a coupon. This thing sold like hotcakes, but there's actually a coupon in here where he actually offered this book for like $5. And he had everybody writing and giving it to as many people as possible just to get the information out. But everybody thought he was a quack. But I'll tell you what, you read this, you'll find out he wasn't. Now, y'all saw the news how Mr. Walker, that American from the Northwest, wanted to join the Taliban. They yanked him out of a bunker. Huh? And they don't know what to do with him. They say he's treasonous, seditious. There's a fellow named Ezra Pound. He was an American poet. He decided he wanted to be inspired, went to Italy. Then the war broke out. He just loved Italy, so he started speaking in favor of fascism and against America. When he came back to his country, they threw him in prison. Now, Ezra Pound lost his mind in prison, but he grabbed a hold of a guy named Eustace Mullins and started talking. How many of you know that some people can be deranged and loony, but there's a part of them that's quite coherent? Huh? And they know what they know. And we're going to be reading about Eustace Mullins and Ezra Pound. A lot of people look at him, and again, one of the reasons he was locked up was because some folk just need him to shut up. Now, I don't need to tell you. Y'all know Lyndon LaRouche. I would never vote for him to be president. But you ever read what he writes? Huh? You ever read what he says? Let me ask you this. Why would the government get anybody for tax evasion and throw them in jail? How many tax cheats are there out there? You know, when the Iron Curtain fell, they asked the Russians, who's your favorite American? They were waiting for somebody to say Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, Kennedy, Clinton. They were waiting for them to say something profound like that. And the Russians said, Lyndon LaRouche. Everybody going, what? And they said, yeah, in our country, the guy got something to say, they put in jail. Can you imagine you get freed and you want to read Lyndon LaRouche and most Americans never read him? I wouldn't vote for him for president, but you need to read what he's talking about. Chapter 1 is called Don't Confuse Me with Facts. You can probably pick this up almost anywhere. All right. Most of us have tried the experience either as parents or youngsters trying to discover the hidden picture within another picture in a children's magazine. Usually you're shown a landscape with trees, bushes, flowers, other bits of nature. The caption reads something like this. Concealed somewhere in the picture is a donkey pulling a cart with a boy in it. Can you find them? As you try as you might, usually you could not find the hidden picture until you turned to the page and farther back in the magazine, which would reveal how cleverly the artist had hidden it from us. If we study the landscape, we realize that the whole picture was painted in such a way as to conceal the real picture within, and once we see the real picture, it stands out like a proverbial painful digit. Right? You understand that? We believe the picture painters of the mass media. Isn't that funny that he's now referring to the mass media as picture painters? Now we're going to read a couple other books. One specifically is Kent Cooper, Barriers Down. This book specifically deals with the saga of the API not having full access to the media coming out of Europe, the birth of the API, the UPI, and their battle against Reuters, Havas, and Wolf, the Europeans. But just real quick, unlike today, when the prime business of news agencies is to collect and distribute news to newspapers, the customers of these early pioneers originally were banking and commercial houses interested in the market prices and developments affecting trade. So what's the original purpose of news agencies? Money, man. It's still money. It's still money. People just don't know it. Every time they show you a guy getting carjacked, how many people bought the club? Huh? Or cars getting stolen, huh? You think that guy made a killing? They tell you about everybody getting mugged. How many people got pepper spray? Huh? They tell you about the boom in Northern California. How many people buying land? They tell you people getting raped. How many people buy burglar bars or deadbolts? Huh? They tell you crime is rising and they allocate more money for more policemen. Can you see the money and everything? Huh? The customers of these three pioneers originally were bankers and commercial houses interested in market prices and developments affecting trade. The three news agencies were in no sense press associations. That is, they were in no sense servants of the press. Like everybody gets the idea when a reporter comes in and he says press and everybody's supposed to bow down. Huh? Nobody cares about these guys. These guys only had one job, take care of people's investments. From these beginnings there arose the first and greatest and most powerful international monopoly of the 19th century. Its potentialities and its activities, viewed the liberal spirit of 1942, they were astounding. When Reuters, Havas, and Wolff pooled their resources, they established a complete news agency to control the international news and allotted themselves the news agency exploitation in all countries of the world. They brought under their control the power to decide what the people of each nation would be allowed to know of the other peoples and other nations, and in what shade of meaning the news was to be presented. Now, do you ever wonder when you watch videotape of Chinese children saying death to America, you ever sit there like me and say, what the hell's wrong with them? Huh? But why do you think they think that? Because these news agencies will only show them what they want them to see. Now, every time there's an earthquake, every time there's a famine, every time there's a flood, and our elementary school teacher said, bring in canned goods. Even when we were poor, did we bring in canned goods? And we ship stuff over to them? Now I'm trying to figure out, why do they hate us if we're the only people that go send them canned goods like that? We're the ones sending clothes. We're the ones sending money. Why do they hate us? You have an idea why they hate you now? Can you imagine news agencies taking control, a monopoly in the disseminating of information, and they determine within themselves that they are going to be the masters or the people in charge of telling other nations what we're about? Now, do you remember the Russians boycotting the Olympics in '84? You remember, any of you ever watched the BBC back then? The BBC was showing Russia's telecasts. And they were actually telling the Russians, they didn't tell them it was political, they told the Russian athletes, the reason we ain't letting you go is because we can't protect you. Let me show you what Los Angeles looks like. And they actually showed them footage of Mexicans tagging the walls, black people getting beat up, white people, rioting. And they said, this is what America's like, and we can't protect you. They showed that on the BBC. This is what they were. Now, where'd they get those newsreels? Where'd the Russians get those newsreels to show the Russian people that? Huh? Where'd they get them? From the news agencies. Hey, listen, if you want to get a videotape of Rodney King getting beat, who do you call? You got to call Fox, man. Right? All right. That's called barriers down. The media monopoly. We need to set these things down. We need to see the whole picture. Authorities have always recognized that to control the public, you must control the information. Is that real? The initial possessor of news and ideas has political power, the power to disclose or conceal, to announce some parts and not others, to hold back until opportunistic moments, to predetermine the interpretation of what is revealed. Leaders of democracies, no less than medicine men, shamans, kings, and dictators, are jealous of their power over ideas, eager to control information as they are to control armies. Controlled information has a morbid history. It's not morbid solely because it violates ideologies of democracy, though it does. It is morbid because it's usually wrong. The authorities were wrong. Their errors created intellectual sterility and immeasurable human misery. But they were not wrong because they were always unintelligent or evil. They were wrong, and they remain wrong because their information, which they sincerely believed, was not effectively challenged by open and competitive ideas. You think the news agency wants to? Now, y'all know about Fox, right? Y'all know about Fox News. Why is Fox News blowing other news agencies out of the water? Because they're just giving you the other side, the spin to the other side, aren't they? Y'all know what Fox News did, don't you? Y'all know the news media, almost every channel, they had a left spin to it. Y'all know that, right? Fox comes along and Fox has a spin going to the right. And more people are tuning in Fox now because they're at least saying, we want to at least hear the other side, not to mention we now have an administration that leans more to the right. So you got two different agencies. Now, let's talk truth. They both have a spin, whether right or left. But are they telling you the whole story? All right, Gary Allen calls them media landscapers, picture painters. We believe the picture painters of the mass media. Who are the picture painters? They're the news agencies. Who runs the news agencies? Well, as we'll go read the media monopoly, they narrowed it down to 50 people or 50 companies. Now, would it surprise you to know that those 50 companies might be owned by a handful of men on two hands? Huh? I told you this when we were going over some of this stuff, but have you ever got mad at Arco and gone to Mobil? Or get mad at Mobil and go to Chevron? Or get mad at Chevron and go to Union? Would it bother you if you found out that Rockefeller owns all of them? Huh? You ever change brands and think, I'm going to fix them, and you buy the other brand, and it's owned by the same folk? And you think you're going to fix their wagon, huh? And the same guy's making the money at the top. I ain't shopping at May Company, I'm shopping at Robinson's. Huh? Well, of course they're both the same. They're always owned by the same people. The chapter's called Don't Confuse Me with Facts. You can probably read a little more as you take these papers home, and you'll find that a lot of this stuff is probably pretty simple to read. He calls them picture painters of the mass media. They artfully create landscapes for us which deliberately hide the real picture. In this book, we will show you how to discover the hidden picture in the landscapes presented to us daily through newspapers, radio, and television. Once you can see through the camouflage, you will see the donkey, the cart, and the boy that have been there all along. Millions of Americans are concerned and frustrated over mishappenings in our nation. They feel that something is wrong, drastically wrong, but because of the picture painters, they can't put their fingers on it. Now, this is why people come up with these conspiracy theories. You know, they don't tell you all the information. Maybe you're one of those persons. Something is bugging you, but you aren't sure what. We keep electing new presidents who seemingly promise faithfully to halt the worldwide communist advance, because back in these days, that was the big issue, was the Cold War. And you're going to find out as we read these books, a lot of people actually thought that the Cold War wouldn't end, but it did. They put blocks in extravagant government spending, doused the fires of inflation, put the economy of an even keel, reversed the trend which is turning the country into a moral sewer, and tossed the criminals into the hoosgow where they belong. Yet despite these high hopes and glittering campaign promises, these problems continue to worsen no matter who's in office. Y'all ever wonder that? FDR, next paragraph. FDR once said, in politics, nothing happens by accident. So if it don't happen by accident, are we going to subscribe to the theory of accidental happenings or conspiratorial? Nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can bet it was planned that way. Ain't nobody knows better than FDR, that chump. Everybody praise him for his New Deal. He screwed America better than anybody ever. You know, he couldn't have screwed anybody any worse. FDR was a jerk. FDR screwed farming. FDR screwed education. FDR screwed the economic nature of this country more than anybody ever did, violating even the 9th Amendment of our Constitution. We'll talk a little more about that too. So he knew. Next paragraph. Those who believe the major world events result from planning, they're laughed at for believing the conspiracy theory of history. Of course, no one in this modern day and age really believes in the conspiracy theory of history, except those who have taken time to study the subject. When you think about it, there are really only two theories in history. Either things happen by accident, neither planned nor caused by anybody. They just happen because they're planned and somebody caused them to happen. So there's two options. Somebody planned it or it just happened by accident. In reality, it is the accidental theory of history, preached in the unhallowed halls of the ivy, which should be ridiculed. What's it saying? You go to college and learn something, you ought to be laughing at them guys. Otherwise, why does recent administration make the same mistakes as the previous ones? Let's go to the next paragraph. Why is that virtually all reputable scholars, mass media columnists, and commentators reject the cause and effect or conspiratorial theory of history? Primarily, mostly because most scholars follow the crowd in the academic world, just as most women follow fashions. To buck the tide means social and professional ostracism. Let's go to the next paragraph. Secondly, these people have over the years acquired a strong vested emotional interest in their own errors. They don't want to admit they're telling a lie. Their intellects and egos totally committed to the accidental theory. Most people are highly reluctant to admit that they have been conned and showed poor judgment. Go to page 10. Third paragraph that starts with however. However, the most effective weapons used against conspiratorial theory of history are ridicule and satire. If you go and tell somebody what you believe, what do they want to do? They want to make fun of you and they want to laugh at you, right? That's the primary weapon used against somebody who knows something. These extremely potent weapons can be cleverly used to avoid any honest attempt at refuting the facts. After all, nobody likes to be made fun of. Rather than be ridiculed, most people will keep quiet, and this subject certainly does lend itself to ridicule and satire. One technique that can be used to expand the conspiracy to the extent it becomes absurd. For instance, our man in the halls of the poison ivy, that's what he refers to the Ivy League, might say in a scoffingly arrogant tone, I suppose you believe that every liberal professor gets a telegram each morning from the conspiracy headquarters containing his orders for the day's brainwashing of his students. Getting a little sarcastic. Now, do you really think this guy gets a communique from conspiracy headquarters? Heck no. But why do they teach what they teach? Because they're just perpetuating a standardized version of what they're supposed to be teaching. Look, we're going to go through some things, and we're going to deal with some things that are also going to be dealing in those areas. That's why I said this whole thing, this whole expose, it's going to take a while. Because one of the biggest lies, one of the biggest issues that we're going to have to fight through or deal with is the false issue of what is called fairness. You ever tell your kids when they say it's not fair, you ever told them life isn't fair? Look, if we're going to make a broad statement that says life isn't fair, why are we expecting fair treatment from anybody? Huh? And why we go around trying to teach fairness? Why is this new agenda of fairness something people really try to embrace? Huh? How many of y'all know that there's a lot of things in life that aren't fair? And they never going to be fair. So why do they keep perpetuating this idea of fairness? Isn't that what the devil's argument was? Hey, it ain't fair, God. I'm funneling all the praise and worship through my singing to you. I want to be like God. This ain't fair. Huh? So we're going to find out that fairness is what one author that we're going to read, he refers to it as Luciferian. The whole notion of fairness is ridiculous. Is God fair? When God said, I choose the Israelites, nobody else, is that fair? Huh? When God said, I will bless those that bless you and curse those that curse you, is that fair? Was it fair that Jesus picked 12 disciples and none were women? Is that fair? Now, if God consistently is not dealing from fairness, now, what does God deal with? God deals through what is called justice. And justice is different from fairness. God has never been interested in fairness because you're never going to get fairness. So if you're never going to get fairness, why do people want to keep preaching fairness? Somebody says, well, these things you've been reading and these things we're going to read at home, when we get home tonight, that just isn't fair. Well, you're a fool to expect fairness. Because you can't even expect fairness with God. You can expect justice from God, but not fairness. What does justice say? Justice says, you get what I say you get. And that's it. Remember that story about those fellas that went out to work, and the first one, he bore the heat of the day, and he said, I'll give you a penny. But what was their big complaint? It ain't fair. The guy who came in last and worked only an hour got the same pay. That ain't fair. And what did Jesus say? Isn't it mine to do with what I want? Didn't I agree with you a penny? Did I give you a penny? Yeah. Then it's fair. It's just. Had nothing to do with fairness. Has to do with justice. So why do we listen to and why do we run around trying to make things fair? And why do we, even as ethnic minorities in this country, run around trying to get fairness from the white man? And anybody who's preaching to run around to try to get fairness from the white man, we're doing nothing but treading on ground that was never God's. We're treading on ground that's the devil's. Now, see, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I'm going to get myself in trouble. Intellectuals are fond of mouthing cliches like the conspiracy theory is often tempting. However, it's overly simplistic. Wasn't it even more overly simplistic to watch television September 11th and read the whole event summed up in 3 words? Attack on America? Huh? If somebody looked and said, well, they did say they struck the serpent in the head. They do call us the white Satans, not because we're white with skin, but because there's something satanic about us. Now, if you start to explain that, what do? Well, that's inviting. That sounds good, but it's too simplistic. And what's their response? Attack on America? War on America? Now, who's being simplistic? Huh? Next paragraph says, in most cases, liberals simply accuse all who discuss the conspiracy as being paranoid. Ah, you right-wingers, they say. Now, ain't nobody in here. I'm not a right-winger. Ah, you right-wingers, they say, rustling every bush, kicking over every little rock, looking for imaginary boogeymen. Then comes the two de grace, labeling the conspiratorial theory as the devil theory of history. The liberals love that one. Even though it's an empty phrase, it sounds so sophisticated. We're going to stop there. Take these pages home and read them.